it's okay if you could go over the first couple slides after I share the screen for some of the protocol. There's no recusals. I think you can skip that portion. So let me get this up.
Excellent.
Are you
Great.
seeing it now?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jeff Johnston. I'll be the chairman for tonight's Design Review Board meeting. This is the October 5th meeting of the City of Charleston Design Review Board. The members of the board present tonight are Dinos Leolio, Michelle Smith, Kristen Kraus, Aaron Stevens, and Andy Smith. The members of the city staff present tonight are David Meeks, the administrator for DRB, Linda Bennett, a preservation planner, and Miss Velvet Simmons, our city clerk. On tonight's agenda, no items have been deferred and no members have been recused. Miss Erica Chase will not be joining us tonight. The order of the meeting is that we'll have an introduction of the project by staff for new projects. There will be a project presentation by the applicant, and we're capping the time limit to 10 minutes. And if you would, before you present, state your name for the record. Then we'll have board questions, followed by any public comments, which tonight we do not have anybody registered for public comments, so we'll skip that section. We'll have city staff recommendations, and the applicant will then have a chance to clarify any staff comments that might have been misstated or inaccurate. Followed, we will have a board discussion, and finally we'll have a board motion and a vote, or board discussion and a vote. I'd ask that you turn off all your mobile phones or other things that might turn noises on during this meeting. And with that, I think we can begin. If I might remind everybody to, prior to speaking, to state your name. For the vote, I'll call roll, and then folks will either say yay or nay. With that, our first agenda item for tonight's meeting is 1517 Savannah Highway, where we are requesting the demolition of Fire Station 11. With that, David, I think this is the first time we've seen this, so if you wouldn't mind providing an introduction, that would be super.
So this is the location for the old Fire Station 11, 1517 Savannah Highway. A little closer view next to the new Porsche Charleston. And this is an image of the fire station that was built in 1961. As Jeff stated, there's a new fire station being built down the road from this that will replace this. It's just a closer image. And with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant, Clark Batchelder.
Hi, my name is Clark Batchelder. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, very well.
Yes.
Good, how are you doing? Just a little bit of background on the site. The Fire Station 11 is adjacent to the old IHOP. And a couple of years back, we had requested approval. We worked with the DRB to get a temporary solution for a sales office on that site. At the time, Baker was working out a deal, I believe, with the city. Upon the city building a new fire station, they were contemplating plans on what they were going to do with this corner lot that's on the corner of Mark Field and Highway 17. So currently we're in the process of, we had a survey done of the entire lot, including the IHOP and the Fire Station 11 site. And what the process that we're trying to go through is to combine these two lots and have a prominent corner on this highway to extend the Baker complex. So, really where this building is positioned, it doesn't address the corner as well as we'd like it to. I think we had talked with David Meeks about possibly renovating it. But the costs associated with that they're just not beneficial in the long run for Baker and what they want for this corner lot. So being that it's a prime corner, especially with their site and against all the other dealerships in this area. So, you know, our request would be to demo this fire station, being that the city does have, you know, plans in place, which they're completing now for the new fire station. So, you know, now that the city's abandoned this building, Baker would like to utilize this site for a potential new building on this corner that would accentuate and cap off their complex, as you will, of showrooms. So that's kind of, you know, our take on it, and we'll leave it at that.
Thank you,
And I
Clark.
think,
We got a few.
yeah, there's two more slides just to give you.
Oh, I added the extra ones you sent as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, we can run through these photos really quickly if you don't mind. Yeah, the interior is kind of in rough shape. You know, it's just a CMU block wall with a concrete T-structure roof. Not to say that it's not stable. You know, just everything really would need an overhaul. You know, we talked with some contractors, and you know, the building just needs so much work. You know, to get it up to a standard and the level that would be needed for reuse. Yeah, you know, missing doors, the kitchen cabinets are rough. All the plumbing would have to be reworked. In talking with the fire chief there, you know, they had a lot of issues with the electrical was old. So really all new MEP would need to be installed. So the only good thing about the building would be the structure. But really, because we're trying to abandon that center lot line and utilize the corner of Markfield and 17, you know, the building's just not located in a good spot on the site.
Super. Thank you, Clark. Is there anything else
Sure.
that you'd like to add? And did we ran through all the photographs, the additional photographs that were provided. At this time, does the board have any questions for the applicant? I have one question. Did we determine the vintage of this building? 1960s, did I hear that?
61, yes.
61. All right, I don't hear anybody from our board having any questions, so we'll move on to city staff recommendations.
Okay, thank you. This is David Meeks again. The applicant had previously proposed a new showroom building to replace existing fire station, but those plans have been put on the back burner. There's nothing to replace this building other than a parking lot, which the board would not have purview over. Staff does support the demolition of the building, as there's little architectural merit with this structure built in 1961. And it was the city's understanding that the fire station would be demolished when they sold it to Baker Motors as a new fire station to replace the old one that's under construction. So with that, staff does recommend approval for demolition.
Thank you, David. With that, I presume the applicant doesn't have any challenge with the staff recommendation, so I'll move on into board discussion. Commentary from our board or a motion?
I would be happy to move for demolition based upon staff comments and the fact that I would agree that the building does not possess any architectural or historically significant elements. Thus, would agree with demolition.
Excellent. We have a motion for approval to demolish the building based on staff comment number 1 and lack of architectural merit. Board comment, lack of architectural merit. Is there a second?
I'll second. Kristen Kraus.
Great, Kristen. All right, so we had a motion from Dinos and a second from Kristen. I'll now take roll. Michelle?
No. Yay, in favor.
Great. Ms. Kraus?
Sorry, I second that
All right.
motion. So yay.
Right. Ms. Stevens?
Yay, in favor.
And finally, Mr. Smith?
Yes, in favor.
And same with myself, all in favor. So congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Clark.
Thank you, Clark.
Uh-oh. Don't know why my mouse is stuck. There we go. Okay.
Item number 2 on tonight's agenda. I believe we've seen this project. It might have been back in February, March, something like that.
I do have just a couple location slides to show
Super.
people where it is again.
All right, this is agenda item number 2, 2947 Maybank Highway. Request conceptual approval for 2 one-story buildings. And David, if you reintroduce the project, that'd be super.
Sure. Here's the location, 2947 Maybank Highway. It's on the corner of Maybank and Wilkes Battery. Here is a closer view. And looking into the site. And with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant. Let's see. So Matt Kennedy. You
Hi.
are,
Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
yes, thank you.
Is it okay if I just do audio, or do y'all prefer a video? It doesn't matter.
It's up to you.
Audio is fine.
Okay. Nobody wants to see me. Trust me. I'm just kidding.
You.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Oh, Matt, excuse me.
Yes.
Just let me know when you'd like me to advance the slide.
Okay. Just to reintroduce, yes, you're correct, Jeff, that we did present this back in February. It is 2 buildings on a very narrow site on Maybank Highway. Our client is looking to build his dental office, Oak Family Dentistry, and also build a second building, which is a tenant building that'll house 3 tenants. And the initial submittal, you guys were pretty good with the buildings, didn't really have much to say about those. Your biggest concern was more with the site, and particularly the landscaping, and even more particularly the area between the 2 buildings. Since that last submittal, the owner has hired an landscape architect, David Tomlin, who is part of the team now and is also will be presenting after me. So we really took to heart the comments that we received, really looked to address the site in terms of the landscaping, and also really softening that area between the 2 buildings where we're required to have the fire drive. It's a challenging site due to all of the kind of drainage issues that we're having to deal with, and the restraints that the civil engineer is having to stay within. So I want to touch real quickly. Typically I would do the site review first, but I really would just like to jump to the office building if we can, and look at those elevations, because we didn't change anything on the tenant building except for the type of signage, which was a comment from the last submittal. So
Yeah, let me know where you'd like me to start.
if you could go to the first elevation slide. No, I think
I believe this is first.
that's the first one. Okay. So, like I had said before, you guys really didn't have many comments about the building itself. There was one comment, I believe, on the north facade about possibly bumping it out. But in the meantime, since that last meeting, we met with the owner, and they wanted us to make a few changes to the office building, which I think we made changes to improve it. As you'll see on the east elevation, the parking lot side, we basically changed the roof slope to be a gable end at that end. And we pulled the north side out to kind of be more of a bump out to, not make it such a square. And you can see from the east elevation, the changes. Obviously, the lower elevation is the previous one. If you go to the next one, David. And this is the south elevation, which faces that center area where the fire drive is, and we really didn't make any changes to it except the roof slope that you see. Next slide, please, David. And this is the north elevation, which would face Maybeck Highway. The change we did make obviously was the slope, and then we did a shed roof off for that area and bumped that whole area out versus just having a smaller section bump out. And we took the signage off of that because as you look back at that site and you really go out there and see, you're really not going to see that signage for Maybank Highway. Unfortunately, the owner has frontage on Maybank Highway, but it's set back so far. Really don't think you would see that signage. So what we instead did, if you go to the next slide, David, was we added more of a feature wall at the front along the Wilts Battery side, in the hope that you would be able to see that more than you would see something facing Maybank Highway. So that's why you see that we added it. The intent is going to be kind of like a wood wall, like a wood slat wall, and then they'll have, you know, a larger element of their signage there to give it some presence. And then we just added some more of the kind of timber material on the right side of that. And you can see it was quite a change from the previous elevation. And really, those are the only changes we made to the buildings. Like I said, we had made in the tenant building, we kind of updated the signage, which we can define more in future submittals, but to not just have kind of like a square sign applied, it would be more similar to the Oak Family Dentistry signage you're seeing. We would apply that for the tenant signage as well. And that being said, I'd like to go ahead and pass it on to David Tomlin, who's done a lot of work on really updating the site and working with our civil engineer to soften that area in between while still maintaining the fire drive, but, you know, making it more of a plaza and more of a usable space, as we discussed at the last meeting.
Thanks, Matt. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
I'm David
Yes, thank you.
Tomlin, a local landscape architect with the Tomlin Company. We joined the team, I think, in early September, so we have hit the ground running. But happy to be part of the team and here tonight. We initially did a thorough site review of this property and picked up a bunch of additional existing shrubs and small trees that I'll talk a little bit later played into satisfying our buffer requirements, both on the 75-foot buffer up on Maybank Highway, but then also along Wilts Battery. And from there, we, in reviewing the DRB comments, really went into the kind of parking lot configuration. I think if you remember, the last submittal had some very large parking lot items. We've not changed any of the parking load, but we split those apart, which allowed us to take the dumpster that used to be at the front drive entrance and tuck that more and utilize, there we go, L101 might be a good, or next, there we go. Was able to pull that dumpster away from the entrance of our parking area, and in reconfiguring and studying what used to be that huge fire truck lane that we still have to deal with, softened that area and created a courtyard field kind of from the direction of the DRB between the two buildings. As far as the little courtyard, what we're proposing right now is to use it's called grass pave. It's a heavy duty plastic kind of grid system that allows us then to use really any surface within that geogrid and make it disappear. And so thus, as you enter into our fire lane and also our courtyard, we have a grassed area with two little paths that lead from our tenant sidewalk and our main office building into a courtyard that's got movable tables and chairs. And we took the limits of the fire truck lane and being able to get in there and lined it with some palmetto trees, some native magnolias, and some bollards. But then within that, softened the fire truck lane even further with ground covers. Fire happens to come, fire truck can come in, firefighters can crush the little ground covers, but and most every other time, it's a nice courtyard feel with some color. This whole palette within the courtyard, and we expanded outwards, is really a heavy duty native palette we took from the last DRB comments about introducing some eastern red cedar. We've also got yopon, holly, viburnum, sweetgrass. We do have a lot of deer near us, so it is deer resistant, and that started our palette. We also we needed to introduce the 4-foot planting strips between the main office building and the parking lot. And that sidewalk now connects to both Maybank Highway and to Wilkes Battery, kind of completing our pedestrian access. We, as well, if you follow our little sidewalk going out to Maybank Highway, we've got a location for a future monument sign. We are not proposing anything with this package now, just giving it a placeholder. That we went back and worked with Chris. We've got a lot of our storm drainage system and some of our utilities snaking through this. This is the 75-foot undisturbed Maybank Highway buffer. So in us picking up some additional trees and plants in that area, worked real close with Chris so that we could not disturb any of that material. We, as well, I'm just kind of looking through our DRB comments. And I believe I've addressed the ones that were all on that from the last DRB. So I'm open for any questions, or if I can expand anything. I'm under my 10-minute time frame, so I wanted to push through. One other thing, since you just flipped over to our detention ponds, we've tried to introduce additional planting around them. As we know, with our new storm drainage ordinance, we are having to plant all of our littoral shelves. So we're in the process right now working out our grading plans so that we can provide that planting.
Great. Thanks, guys. And you have 5 seconds left.
All right.
You did it. Does anybody have any questions for Matt or David?
I have a couple of questions. Okay. I had a couple quick questions for David about the landscape plan. I saw in that central courtyard area, that's the fire lane. I know that there's a label on that says sod for that central area, but then there's and down below it says sod 2 on the plan, but then it calls out plantation mix. And I just want to clarify, which is it all sod, or is there a hardscape element to it?
Great catch. I didn't even catch that in my review. As if we were coming out of our parking lot, we'd hit our sidewalk and we could walk along plantation mix to where we'd sit underneath the table and chairs. But what we wanted to do was allow that little bit of sod at the front so that, you know, if you're coming for the dentist office or something and you're kind of waiting out in your car, it's a very inviting. So we've got sod right there. And yes, underneath the table and chairs is plantation mix.
Okay.
Great catch.
And then the other question I had, and you kind of touched on it, but just to clarify, you mentioned the littoral plantings, which we love, but I didn't see them like in the plant schedule or any plants called out. I assume you're just still working on the mix of plants, or have you come up with that yet?
100%.
We're still working with Chris on his grading plan. You know, our littoral shelves have to be, we've only got a couple of inches of variation, and he's still working to define that actual shelf. And then we'll introduce our plantings and, you know, add it all to the planting schedule.
Yeah, this is Chris Waddell, civil engineer for the project. yeah, we're working on the grading to get the littoral shelves in there. The ponds are not very large, so it's a little bit of a challenge to get the pond depth that we need from a, mosquito and vector standpoint, getting, at least 3 feet of water depth, permanent pool depth, while also fitting in the littoral shelves. So, but pretty much where we're showing littoral shelves, we'll have them. And we're working with David on the grading for that. I will say on pond number 1 at the front near Maybank, I do not think we'll be able to fit a littoral shelf in that pond due to the size of it.
But are they all wet ponds? All three of
Yes,
them?
they are all wet ponds.
Okay. That's all my questions. Thank you.
This is Dino Sliolio. Matt, can I ask you a quick question? David, would you mind going back to the elevation? I think it's the east elevation, if I'm not mistaken. And that one works as well. 2 questions. Your thoughts and your thought process. The brick base, everything is so simple in terms of the material. I mean, I guess one of the questions I would have, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels, is the brick base a necessary element? And the second issue is that's quite a field in the gable. Thoughts on the evolution of that? You're just going to leave it in terms of just ongoing siding?
I think 2 things. The brick base we like just for durability purposes in terms of, maintenance around it, landscaping, those kind of things. And just, we don't necessarily prefer to take siding to the ground. I mean, that's one of the reasons we typically do it. I know that we are taking the vertical board and batten to the ground, but it's kind of a change, to distinguish those areas from the main building structure. And in terms of the gable, you're right, it is something that came up. And at one point I had that same kind of feature wall that we have on the opposite side of the building, there as well, to break that up. But I didn't think it was necessary on the parking lot side, to be honest with you. And I know that space may be getting a little bit large, but I felt like we were addressing it on the opposite side with the signage, and I didn't think it would be necessary on the parking lot side. But I do understand, you bringing that question up.
Great. I think Andy probably has been trying to chime in with some questions. I'm going to leave some space for Andy to join in.
Yeah, I apologize for the echo. I guess my question was, looking at where that trash enclosure is, do y'all envision that being a rollout, or do you see the trash truck getting into that? I guess I'm trying to figure out, what the angle of it, what's going on there.
We looked at it with an option for either. And that's where we kept saying where we can move it and make the least kind of visual impact. And then with kind of redesigning the courtyard and keeping the paving for the fire lane between our 2 tree islands, it allowed for, if it is a dumpster, for it to get in and give it enough circulation.
Okay. All right, I appreciate the answer.
I had one question, and it's in regards to that fire lane. The last time I think we had talked, that fire lane had it was much bigger and it had much more of a visual impact. And I very much appreciate the solution that's here. I'm curious about the striping that goes on the asphalt portion for the fire lane. Does it require to be of a certain color? Is it required to be white or red?
This is Chris Waddell. To my knowledge, it would be white.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from the board for the applicant?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. The sign on the Wilkes Battery view, from the Wilkes Battery view, it looks like it's freestanding in front of the building facade. Is that correct? Is that the correct intention?
Yes. It's Matt. Sorry.
And about how many feet separate the back side of that sign and the finished siding of the building?
I think there's about it's about around 2 to 3 feet. It's about somewhere around 2 feet or 3 feet. I can't remember the exact dimension, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
I do not.
Great. If not, we'll move to, there are no public comments, so we'll move to city staff recommendations.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. This is David Meeks again. Staff comments. Number one, staff likes the simple design and the materials used for this project. The applicant has addressed most all of the staff and board comments from the last review. Comments from the last meeting that were not addressed. Sidewalks in the front are not tabby as we had suggested and remain concrete. I think staff could be okay with that. And the entry drive was not extended to the east property line. I don't know if the board remembers. I think they were asking right here to just extend the asphalt to the property line. They didn't do that, but they did add shrubs, and I thought this might be okay since we're not sure when the project to the east will be developed. And this seems like a fine solution for now. Let's see. And then lastly, the detail for the on-site traffic signs are shown, but the post is not called out. It needs to be decorative wood or metal, post painted black. Minor detail that can be addressed at the next review. So staff does recommend conceptual approval.
Thank you, David. In regards to the connectivity of the drives, is this, I've forgotten, is this the only way to get to the adjacent parcels?
The adjacent parcel right now has frontage on Maybank Highway, but I think the plans for future development would be to connect to this road.
Got it.
And as far as connecting to the property line, the issue is the radius that it would take to extend the driveway. You would only get partial radius if you sort of mirror that driveway there.
Sure.
So it would require an access easement, I guess, to be deeded to the city to get that radius to fit in there. So at this time, we're just showing, plantings and a curb, a little bit of curb and gutter there.
Thank you. Chris, one more question for you, and this is a little bit out of order, but just to clarify that. Is this access road, is that going to be a shared egress? Is it intended to be shared egress with the adjacent parcels in the future? Not today.
As of this time, it is an access easement. The discussions with the city is that the owner would deed an access easement. And then in the future, if I guess the southern portion of the site, which we're not doing any development on, if any development were to occur on the southern portion of the site, then it would be subdivided and right of way would be given to the city.
Okay, but it's not that way today.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, thank you, David, for the staff comments summary. Does the applicant, would they like to clarify anything that Mr. Chris has not already done?
No.
Excellent, thank you. All right, then we'll enter board discussion. I'd love to hear some thoughts from our board members.
Jeff,
Board members.
this is Andy.
Mr. Andy.
Sorry, I'll be quick to get back rid of the feedback. But I guess I have a little bit of experience with that access way, and I understand what they're saying about the radius and not being able to get a full radius, but understanding what that's intended to be in the future, I'd like to see some gesture towards that being, it is intended to be a off Maybank crossing of the island. It kind of reflects through all of the developments along this way. So I would, I guess personally in my comment, like to see some gesture towards that being so. And, even with removing the shrubs or even without a full radius, just something that shows that that will continue on into the future, and gives them the apron to tie into later. I think is a good continuation of that way. And just from a planting standpoint, I think I applaud the direction they've gone with the landscaping. I think that there's still some editing that can occur. The buildings are so very simple. I think that the planting palette could probably use some reduction of the number of types of plants really kind of coming through. And, of course, I'll push for as native as we can get, but just I think there's a lot going on in the planting plan that could be edited down to, match the architecture. And I'd like to see them to reduce the sod as much as possible, not necessarily right there in that courtyard area, but around the banks of that pond could really use to, be some native grasses, meadow, that sort of concept. I think would really work well, reduce the amount of sod, work with the littoral plantings. And then I think they really need to study the angle of that enclosure. I'm not real sure they'll be able to get a trash truck in there if it's not a roll-out dumpster. That's all I really have. My thoughts.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Andy.
This is Dinos. David, can you go back to the elevations for a moment?
Sure.
And I certainly appreciate Matt's explanation. And I don't know how the rest of the board feels. There's been such a wonderful gesture towards simplification of the facade. And as we've talked before with other projects that have come before the DRB, I mean, the very simple structure is really what we've agreed personifies the aspect of Johns Island in the rural area. I appreciate what the applicant shared regarding the base, the brick base. I just feel that it would be more toward the goal that they have expressed as far as simplifying the structure with the removal of the brick base, in as much as they removed it from the board and batten, vertical board and batten side. It's just another material that's been added that I don't know. I mean, and you guys may disagree with me. I just don't know if it's necessary. The other issue is steel, and I know that it's going to be facing a parking lot side, but that is quite an expansive siding that you have up there. And I'm a little worried just from this, again, the satisfaction of all of the elevations that that has not been given enough consideration as it's moved forward. Otherwise, I guess the other thing, can you go to the feature wall that Michelle was asking about? I mean, how do you guys, it's not an entry portal. I mean, I'm assuming it's just signage, is that correct?
That's what I understand it to be, Dinos.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would tend to, once it's separated from the building, consider it a monument sign, which
Exactly.
I don't.
Yeah.
I think that's playing games too much. Not that it was an intention to play games, but
yeah. I'm just, it's becoming such a significant element. I'm framing out a window. I kind of feel the same way. It's,
Well, it's not really in scale with the building that's behind it. I mean, I do like it as an element. I'm not saying I don't like it as an element. I think it contributes, but it kind of reminds me like of a bay window or something like that. That's a new interpretation of a bay window, which if it were attached to the building, that would be more true, but it's not. But even if it were a bay window, it would be slightly proportioned different. It seems a little heavy right now.
I mean, that is, I can't read what the height of that element
Right. I was
is.
just trying to zoom in as well.
I don't know if it's like 19.6. I was trying to guess it too.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a monumental structure.
Yeah, it's gigantic.
Mhm. I mean, again, I'm just looking at the aspect, yeah. I mean, this is a great image, and again, I mean, you guys may not agree. I mean, and certainly nothing that I would preclude my support if we go forward with the conceptual approval. But that base just it from a visual standpoint, it conflicts so much and with what is going on above it.
I
And
think particularly, if I can kind of add on to that, I don't disagree with you, particularly with the colors proposed here, where the color is such a stark contrast with the siding above it. I don't disagree with you. A little bit of editing wouldn't hurt. At a minimum, color.
Yeah,
And,
at a minimum color, but yeah, I would prefer to see the siding just similar to the detail that he's using on the board and batten to go all the way down. And you know, I'm wondering if again, in context with the rural area, if it would be more interesting if the signage itself, in lieu of being a popped out structure, were just applied to the gable side of this building.
I had that same thought, Dinos. You know, and I almost feel like it could work on the Wilkes Battery elevation and the parking lot side if it didn't compete too much with the entry signage, you know. A little bit of a design decision, but I was thinking that may be an appropriate, you know, solution there as well. It troubles me to see the sign that closely in front of the building because you're right, Jeff. It wants to start to break up that elevation and become a bay, but it's not. It's still in front of the building. And then I think of all of these maintenance nightmares trying to get in between those things. So anyway, but I see that, you know, it's a device which helps to break up that tall space under the gable, right? So that's why we're looking at it, you know. That's why we're looking at it.
Yeah, and I just feel it'd be so much more successful sticking with simplicity in a rural dialogue that this just might be applied directly to the facade and do away with all of the extraneous. Are those light? What are the 6 indentations? Are those light fixtures?
No, maybe more like structure. You know, if you had something come out kind of holding that wall, essentially, like a timber or something. And all the things you guys discussed are thoughts that have gone through my head 10 times over. Does it apply to the building? Does it come out? You know, I mean, yeah, and this is where we landed. So, I mean, I think all of your comments are very valid. And, you know, we, as designers, I think we've all gone through the same thought process and iterations of it. So I appreciate your insight. So.
Well, I think it'd be, as I think it was Jeff or Andy or somebody, Michelle maybe. I think it would be a nice addition to John's Island. A little more editing and really further delayering and simplifying the aspect, keeping in mind the context that it's in. These are the type of structures that can begin to convey a sense of direction for future developments as they come forward too. And I think those are the extent of what I feel would possibly be.
But it's actually refreshing to see buildings of this scale, because I think they are a reflection of the past, the architectural past of Johns Island, and this type of building needs to speak more direct to that. It's the next generation small building, Johns Island, and traditionally those buildings are very simple, edited, and we're not quite there. I think overall the form is there. It's just the materiality applied to that form could just use that simplification. So it's so close. But is there anyone any more comments? And if there are no comments, would anyone like to pose a motion?
Well, if you guys help me out, I'll be happy to start with a motion. Oh Lord, here comes Dinos and his motion. I would move for conceptual approval with the following comments. Staff comment number 3. And board comment is to restudy the base of the building in terms of materiality. Keeping in mind simplicity and rural context. I would encourage that the base be restudied and the siding come all the way to grade. Number 2 is the, I don't know what elevation it is with the sign, with the projecting sign. Yeah, there we go.
West elevation.
Yeah, restudy the west elevation, eliminating the projection, and consider the placement of signage on the facade. Michelle, may I ask you, you suggested it be placed on both sides, right? I mean, I like the idea.
Well, insofar as the gable height, is a concern, it was just a suggestion, but I think the applicant can study, study whether it works on both sides, one side, or if another device may need to be employed on the parking lot side. I don't want to limit, the solutions.
But eliminate the projection and place the signage on the building. Aaron, Andy, let's see, another item is to restudy the angle of the trash enclosure to ensure clean operation.
Yes, just to make sure that you can get that trash truck in and out of there if that's the direction they're going.
Reduce the number of plants.
I think edit the landscape palette is the way I'm asking is I think there's reduce the number of species, maybe just reduce and refine, simplify.
So edit landscape palette.
Yes, sir.
Reducing and simplifying plant schedule.
Yes, sir. And study the elimination of turf, if at all possible.
Do you mean restudy the actual application?
The use of turf specifically around the ponds, I think is the area that I'd like them to study the most.
Andy, I think we can. Sure, that little area about is where the laydown yard. So we can come back and naturalize that.
I appreciate it. Just study it for the next time, please. And then, Dino's my final thought was a gesture towards the extension of that drive, even without the full radius there, just to show that that will continue on.
Very good. Michelle, did I miss anything?
Did you mention the continuation of the drive to the north property line? Or-
Andy just got it in there.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's it.
Great. Okay. I will repeat that motion. We'll have a motion for conceptual approval with staff comment number 3, with board comments number 1, to restudy the materiality of the building base with the tendency to simplify and to encourage the siding to the grade. Number 2, study the projection feature wall on the west elevation. Consider eliminating and placing signage in the gables. Comment number 3, study the scale of the exposed siding in the gables. Comment number 4, restudy the angle of the dumpster enclosure to accommodate truck access. Number 5, reduce the plant palette species, simplify so that it mirrors the building concept. Number 6, study a reduction in turf and consider eliminating around ponds. And I have one more. Comment number 7, to connect adjoining properties with a drive extension on a north property.
I think that's east, connected to the east property line. Is that
Okay. Yeah, page north, so it's probably actual east, yes.
Concerning connecting the driveway, or at least the
Chris, I appreciate that. This is not the time to respond. I apologize.
10-4.
Thank you, Chris.
I think you got everything, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval per comments. Does anybody second?
Sandy, I'll second.
Andy seconds, great. I'll now take roll for the motion. Ms. Smith?
Yay, in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Kraus?
Yay, in favor.
Ms. Stevens?
Yay, in favor.
Excellent, and myself as well. The motion is conceptual approval with the comments previously stated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Item
It's
number
coming along.
3. Item number 3 on the agenda is 1800 Produce Lane. This is a new project that's granting conceptual approval for a new one-story retail center. And David, if you wouldn't mind giving an introduction, that would be very helpful.
Thank you. This is David. Here's the location, 1800 Produce Lane. It's a new street that's going to be developed. And here's a closer image. I didn't draw the exact boundary lines because it was a little hard to tell exactly where it was, but this is the general location. You'll see from the presentation where the exact property lines are. And then this is the existing road, which is yet to be developed. And then this is looking into the site right here. And with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant. Lassie?
Great. Lassie,
Hey, good
are you
evening,
there?
guys. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good evening. So we've got Kyle Taylor, who's actually the civil, who's going to open the presentation, and then I was going to take over with the architecture.
Thank you, Kyle. Let me know when you'd like me to advance slides.
Kyle, are you there? I see him on our list of participants. He is muted.
Let me see if I can buzz him real quick and get him unmuted. Sorry about that. Well, guys, I can try to work through the civil presentation, I guess, until Kyle steps in. Really wanted him to explain the ask about the 75-foot type H landscape buffer. We have a letter that he's put together that I think best describes that, but we can try to go through the slides, and I'll do the best I can if that works for you guys.
Yeah, it's showing him as unmuted now, but I still can't hear Kyle. But if you feel like you can proceed, then please go on.
Yeah, this is going to be a little difficult because Kyle's been part of this project much longer than I have.
I believe we received this letter, haven't we, David? Sorry to interject.
I did get the letter to the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say it's self-explanatory.
Yeah.
And we understand.
Okay. So, all right, thank you. David, I guess if we can skip ahead to some of the civil plans. So as everybody can see, the site fronts Maybank and then is also at the corner of Produce Lane. We've had an opportunity to go through initial or conceptual TRC for feedbacks, and this is where it currently stands. Actually, Kyle is calling me now. Hold 1 second, I apologize. Let me see if he can respond here. Hey, Kyle. Okay. I'm going to see if I can put you on speaker. Yeah. Can anybody, try to talk, Kyle, see if this works?
Yeah. Can they hear me? Can you guys hear me?
That works great. Yes.
That's working.
That work. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'll try to speak loudly as well. I don't know if I'm merged or if I'm on speaker, but I called in with my cell phone, and I guess my cell phone hasn't been unmuted, so we'll proceed. Anyway, I appreciate you guys bearing with our technical difficulties. So this is Kyle Taylor, for the record, with Hoyt and Brainy, civil engineer, landscaper for the project. I know you guys started getting into it, but so our project is on this 1 acre out parcel here at the corner of Produce Lane and Maybank Highway. I don't know if, in case any of you guys checked out the zoning GIS and maybe were scratching your heads. The property lines are still to be recorded. So looking forward to the final plat being accepted with the city's closeout process, but Produce Lane has been improved and constructed. And so we're anticipating that closeout to be finished any day or any week at this point. And so we're excited about this project, fronting Maybank Highway about 800 feet from the River Road intersection. There's a lot going on, as I'm sure many of you are aware of, with road improvements, turn lanes being added at River Road, et cetera. And obviously the previous applicant here that you guys heard from is really just a couple doors down, more or less. So there's a lot going on here in this area. So our site, maybe jumping into a few things stormwater wise. So our site fronts Maybank Highway and is adjacent to the retention pond that's been constructed to the rear. So, you know, that's part of our request in our application that I think you guys started to touch on with the landscape buffer. So we are to the rear bounded with a pond parcel, as well as adjacent to some residential as well to the rear. And so we've laid out our site to hopefully maximize the efficiency and the enjoyment for the community and for the businesses that will move into this building. It's proposed to be retail, office, and potentially a restaurant user with that nice patio covered trellis area on the end. And so we've done our best to, number one, maximize parking to the best of our abilities. Off the peninsula, parking per the zoning ordinance can be a little bit of a challenge to achieve the, one space per 200 square feet. So we are doing our best to maximize parking and create a full circulation around the site. And so that's where you see we've got the full access entering the site from Produce Lane. That apron is installed, and vehicles would be able to enter the site, and then it tapers to a one-way angled parking as they are able to leave the site, and that helps prevent vehicles from having to do three-point turns and only have one way in and one way out with a dead-end parking arrangement. So probably our biggest request here is just concerning that, per the zoning ordinance requirements, the 75-foot type H landscape buffer. And we've done our best to, like I said, maximize the site and be very thoughtful in our design approach, incorporating the building and making a very appealing streetscape. And so the project would, probably not be feasible maintaining that 75-foot buffer. I think we've got a great project here for your consideration for our building placement to be right up to the property line. We've basically placed the building right on the property line. We'll be doing some tweaking to help ensure that overhangs, et cetera, do stay on the property. That'd be an encroachment request that we're probably not prepared to request with the DOT. And so that's the project and the site plan in a nutshell. And David, maybe I can just go through the landscaping as well, just to touch on it. And so this is our conceptual landscaping plan. We've coordinated a few items with David, specifically the screen walls that we've placed. So I will draw attention to the screen wall adjacent to the patio. That's proposed to I think we tapered it, and Lassie can confirm. But once you go into view of the parking lot, it goes up to 4 feet adjacent to the patio area, and then on the other side of that driveway apron, that's a 4-foot screen wall with the type A 15-foot landscape buffer. And actually that's even been able to be reduced to 12 feet front, it's 12 feet from the 7-foot easement that we have adjacent to the property line. So we are staying out of a 7-foot easement that's going to have just sod installed over that 7-foot easement for dry utilities. We are proposing the 25-foot type D buffer adjacent to the residential. And so that's got a little bit of a dense hedgerow, canopy trees, and understory trees. And then as you go down adjacent to the pond, I will call attention to, we are removing that type D buffer. We are coordinating with Eric Schultz. The way the zoning code appears to be interpreted, the pond, even though it's not a residential use, it is to be zoned residential. So we actually submitted our application today for BZA consideration to allow us to have the parking spaces and that dumpster enclosure sited in that corner of the site. The other location that we had in mind for the dumpster enclosure is that sod area, kind of to the north, behind the screen wall, and that being so close to the right of way, even though it's sort of an allowed placement, we felt that we had staff support that the placement to the rear of the site for the pond was a better placement for that dumpster enclosure, and just trying to get more parking. So that's what's going on at the rear of the parcel. We've got the wetlands that we are staying out of at the south end of the parcel, about 25 feet of jurisdictional wetlands to remain as part of a core impact permit with the produce lane improvement. So we are 100% staying out of that area, and probably just to kind of wind out the landscaping, aside from our typical program with the canopy tree and the islands, and the perimeter landscaping around the parking. We are cleaning up the frontage along Maybank Highway. So we have some photos in our submittal, and maybe some of the members of the board have driven by. The produce lane clearing and grading kind of ended at the property line. So our intent is to clean up the frontage along Maybank Highway, which does include removing one 24-inch water oak, which we feel we have staff support to remove, which was included in our BZA application today as well. So our intent is to get that area cleaned up along the frontage, install the sidewalk, and create an inviting pedestrian area. And maybe lastly, I'll just note what was included in the letter, that we appear to be in a pedestrian shed per the Maybank Highway community plan. And so that appears to also support our general program of the building placement along the frontage and the parking in the rear, which I think in general everyone these days tends to gravitate toward. So that's the site elements, I think, in a nutshell. And hopefully I didn't steal too much of our time here, and maybe I'll swing it to Lassie if there's still any time to talk about the building.
Well, we got allocated 10 minutes. You took all 10 of them. But I'll give Lassie a few minutes to talk about the architecture.
All right, thank you guys. David, if we could advance several slides till we get to the bird's eye architectural. Yeah, right there. Thank you. Yeah. So just to build off of what Kyle said, so right now we're looking at this thing as being a multi-tenant retail building. The use is to be determined. You can see this is the view that fronts Maybank, and we're kind of also anchoring this corner along Produce Lane. This gives you a sense of kind of height, mass, and scale there. I think we can skip ahead one or two slides. Yeah. So you can see the building footprint is set up for up to 6 smaller tenants, or could potentially be combined for a few larger tenants. We are on the right-hand side there. You can see to the east where we have got the outdoor dining area. And then to the far left corner, Unit E, is where we've got electrical panels, which we feel like are screened by that wetland buffer there. Next slide, please. And the roof Roof plan's fairly straightforward. We have standing seam, metal roof panels, and then we have certain portions that are parapets on the ends where we're actually using those to screen the mechanical units. Next slide, please. I feel like this is an important slide because we realize as we studied this building in sort of two-dimensional elevation, it's a little bit of a longer building, but the way that you actually see it and experience most times on Maybank, either east or west, you sort of see it as a series of smaller buildings, and that was sort of the goal, is to sort of break down that massing, especially as it's the initial building that you see turning into Produce Lane, going into the residential development. And again, sort of trying to have a restaurant tenant which could provide some activity and anchor that corner right there. Next slide. And just the opposite view from the east on Maybank. Next slide. As you get a little bit closer from Maybank, you can see we've kept the materials very simple. We're looking at some sort of shiplap, hopefully around an 8 to 10 inch exposure, which you can see on the left side, massing. And then on the right side where the gable is, we're looking at switching to stucco as you sort of work your way down the building. We've got different materials. And then the contrasting elements would be the storefront and then some of our steel canopy features. Next slide. And this is a sort of a threshold or sort of an edge condition that we really studied a lot, trying to provide some screening in the parking lot. And you can see we've got this stucco landscape wall that not only creates sort of a pleasant area for outdoor dining, but then does screen some of the parking area as well as it extends across our driveway. Next slide. All right, just rear parking. Next slide. Typical tenant from the parking lot side. Next slide, please. And then this is where you can see some of the outdoor dining area where we're looking at having probably cedar for these joists that occur to define that area on top of the wide flange steel members. Again, just trying to keep the palette as simple as we can. Next slide. And then finally, the building elevations, which I think are fairly self-explanatory. So we're happy to field any questions there might be.
Great, thank you, Lossie, and thank you, Kyle. Anybody from the board have any questions?
I did have one question. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Dinos.
No,
You go ahead.
No, you should.
Oh, I just was curious of what the setback is from Maybank Highway to the beginning of the building structure. Do we know what the setback feet is?
Yeah.
So you
yeah, well, the setback is, so my understanding is it's based on really the board's prudence. You know, the zoning code requires a certain setback based on the miles per hour. So in this case, 45 miles per hour, I think is actually something like 50 feet. But then there's a clause that says that's not applicable in the DRB commercial corridor. So then it's just a matter of the landscape buffer.
I think she was
Kyle, also, I
asking
think you had to-
currently how far back does the building sit from Maybank?
What are you proposing from the Maybank or maybe even from the property line to the building face?
Yeah, we're proposing approximately 5 feet from the property line to the building face.
How about the curb of the street or the edge of the asphalt to the building edge? That's really, I think, what we're asking. 30 feet?
Yeah, it's roughly 30 feet, yeah.
So 30 feet, and then there's a 5-foot setback off it, like 25 feet is the setback, and then 5 feet from that, essentially.
Yeah, and guys, I will share with you, it looks like the edge of asphalt there varies a bit. So in some cases, it's 23 feet. In other cases, it goes up to just under 30. So we're proposing a sidewalk there, and we're roughly 7 feet or 8 feet back from the sidewalk.
What's driving the sidewalk placement? I'm not seeing any sidewalk. Well, that's comment, but what's driving the sidewalk placement? Lossie.
question.
Or
I mean,
Kyle.
truthfully, it can generally waver a little bit there, but we are not tying in to sidewalk at the south. But we're tying into the sidewalk that's existing along Produce Lane. And I will say too, you know, we're anticipating some minor widening of the edge of pavement a couple of feet for a left turn lane. So, you know, we do want to stay a little bit off of that, at least 5 feet, which obviously does not appear to be a problem. But generally, we just want to stay a little bit off the property line and make sure we're at least 5 to 10 feet away from the edge of pavement.
Michelle, I think the zoning code requires you to have a sidewalk in front of the site as you develop.
Correct.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple other questions too. I noticed that in the streetscape elevation and the building, like the perspective renderings, you were showing some doors along Maybank, like with door handles and everything, but then in the plans, there don't seem to be any. So can you just confirm that there aren't actually going to be doors along Maybank, or are they just not shown in the plan?
Yeah, that's a great catch. I think we're showing something that's intended to have a vertical scale that would be more like a fixed door. And then I think on each side, we actually have some knee walls. But yeah, right now we don't intend for those to be operable.
Okay, and then the other question I have that's related to that same area, because in the renderings and in the streetscape, again, you show these, you know, this nice rhythm of trees that match the facade. But then if you look at the landscape plan, that's not reflected in the landscape plan. There's just a couple of Yopon hollies. So I didn't know, are you intending to try to plant within the right of way to give that landscape treatment along the front, or are you only proposing the shrubs that are shown in this plan that doesn't have too much between Maybank and the front of the building?
Yeah. This is Kyle Taylor. I'll answer that at least from the civil side, and Lassie maybe chime in. I don't see DOT wanting us to plant in their right of way, and so given our close placement of the building to the property line, I was anticipating the foundation plantings with no trees, definitely no canopy trees in front of the building.
Okay, and just to clarify, this landscape plan doesn't show full foundation plantings, but this is what you're proposing, not what's shown in the renderings and elevations.
Correct. We'd be showing foundation plantings. That's correct.
Guys, if we were able to fit a few palms or something between the sidewalk and the building, I think it would be helpful to have something like a palm to kind of help break up the rhythm and the length of the building. If not, I understand, but that was kind of our intent on the as shown on the renderings. So we need to coordinate that together a little bit better.
Lossie, this is Dinos. Did I understand y'all have received conceptual TRC approval?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you confirm that, Kyle? Is that
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
right.
We submitted. Yep.
And they're supporting the placement of the buildings?
Yeah, generally I would say they are supporting the placement. You know, we received, you know, the general comment that placement shall be confirmed and is able to be approved by the design review board. You know, so they generally swing that authority to you guys. But in general, I do feel that we have Eric Schultz's support and the TRC support for our plan.
And the reason that the buildings are placed so close to the street are to comply with parking? I guess my question is this: is your parking layout meeting or exceeding zoning?
Yeah, our number of parking spaces based on our parking summary meets the zoning ordinance, but we are definitely not, I would not say we are exceeding it based on the anticipated restaurant use, which kicks up the requirement from say 1 per 200 spaces off the peninsula to 1 per 90 spaces for a restaurant user. So we are right at the minimum of the zoning ordinance for parking spaces.
And Kyle, what was the comments we received in TRC relative to our proximity to the intersection of River Road? I think we were within 1,200 feet of it. Therefore, they were more open-minded to the building, fronting the street a little more. Am I right in that?
Yeah, there is a clause in the zoning ordinance about if you're within 1,400 feet or you're outside of that 1,400 feet from the intersection. But generally, the landscape buffer along Maybank is under the authority of the DRB if they wanted to allow placement of the building inside that landscape buffer.
May I ask an architectural question?
Please.
The monitor that you have on the building, does it translate at all to the interior spaces?
The cupola
Mhm.
feature? It could. We'd love it if there was a tenant that would take advantage of it. You know, as we sort of studied the perspective up and down Maybank, obviously we studied it with and without it, and we felt like when you see the next 1 or 2 slides, it seemed to really add to, David, I'm not sure if we can advance the slide, but it really seemed to add to the composition of how you start to see these masses together in series as multiple buildings to a certain degree rather than just one larger building. So we felt like it broke down the massing a little bit and provided some feature in the middle in case they did end up with some sort of anchor tenant, which we're not certain of right now.
Yeah, and Lassie and the board, this is Kyle Taylor again. Just maybe to introduce for the record, Lassie, what you're referring to with the zoning code in 1,400 feet, I don't know, maybe it would be helpful if I read the section in the zoning ordinance. So, you know, in the specific comment as well, it was included in the specific comment from Eric at the TRC. So along Maybank Highway on Johns Island within 1,400 feet of River Road, design review district in order to allow for new buildings to relate harmoniously with the streetscape and other structures in the vicinity when deemed appropriate by the DRB. Buildings may encroach into class 1 road buffers, class 2 road buffers, and the class 6 road buffers, which is buffer type H. And it goes on about a few other areas as well, but maybe that would be helpful just to introduce as well, just for everybody's reference.
Thank you, Kyle. Any other questions or thoughts? Questions? Not hearing any more requests. So with that, I'll move into city staff recommendations. Mr. Meeks.
Thank you, Jeff. This is David. Staff comment number 1. Staff finds the design of the retail center very nice, simple, clean. The materials used, the heavy double brackets and the tower feature in the center add to the character of the building. We like that the buildings are up on the street and the parking is behind the buildings. The applicants are showing the building within the 75-foot landscape buffer and need DRB approval for this, which in this case staff supports. This area of Maybank Highway is in the Johns Island Master Plan as being one of the 3 town portions of Maybank Highway, Maybank Highway Town and Country Plan, as it is close to the River Road node. And the city planning department supports this as well. Given the width of the lot, the project would not work unless they're able to be within the landscape buffer. Number 3, the applicants are showing a screen wall at the outdoor patio area, and staff had them extend the wall further towards the entry drive, and also add more wall to the south side of the driveway. The wall is lower at the outdoor seating and steps up as it gets beyond the seating area to better screen the parking lot. Number 4, the applicants are showing screening to the roof, mechanical in a thoughtful way, symmetrical way, which staff likes. Number 5, the arbor at the outdoor seating area adds to the attractiveness of this project. Number 6, in a previous version, the applicants were showing the trash enclosure up close to Produce Lane, but staff requested that they move it to its current location. So with that, we do recommend conceptual approval.
Great. I didn't hear much in here that the applicant might object to. I might move on over to board discussion.
I'll start. This is Erin Stevens. And just start by saying that I'm not necessarily opposed to them moving the building into the buffer. I think that this is a place where that is appropriate. That said, I think that that makes that facade and its interaction with the street a lot more important. And I'm not sure that, especially the landscape plan as it's currently shown, gives enough attention to that. You know, how they could better engage the sidewalk and plantings and the building and all there. So that's my biggest concern, is not necessarily that they're in the buffer, but that it gives a certain responsibility to handle the landscape and its interaction with the street in a little more thoughtful way.
This is Andy. I echo Aaron's statement with that. I don't have any problem with them moving forward. I just think, looking at the plan, that the plan needs a breath somewhere. It just feels like it's holding its breath everywhere, trying to be everything and be everywhere. That it needs to loosen up somewhere. It's just, and you know, that frontage is one place, you know, just everything, you know, the landscape's kind of pushed all the way to the edge, everything's in a straight line. It needs some looseness to it that I feel like is missing in the plan. And that interaction with the street, I think, is going to now be, as Aaron says, very, very important. And if we can get some articulation in there, get some palms, something that breaks that up, I think would be important.
And this is Dinos. You know, I think that, again, it's wonderful to see the endeavor of the simplification and the effort to really embrace a rural contextual design endeavor. And again, I think that to me, it's a very close resolution. I guess there are only maybe 3 or 4 things that I would say, and again, it's really nothing of any major consequence. We have seen these types of cupolas, monitors come before us where, in fact, they were not engaged at all and just came ornaments on a building. And truthfully, Lossie, I think you have, David, can you go to the elevation, to the perspective, or go to the building elevation? That would be fine. Those are great. I really think that this is quite successful without the cupola. The simplicity of the roof form, the manner in which it interacts with the 2 gables front of forming the other gable, the major gable that's coming down. I just feel that's just very, very nice. And I just wonder if the cupola, if you and if Jeff and Michelle feel otherwise. I mean, it's just very clean without it. I would also tell you that I would probably ask you to restudy the application of the stucco and just stick with the simple wood siding. I mean, again, it's just very clean and just a very simple way. I'm glad to see that you've brought the material, minimized the extent of materials, and have brought the palette down to grade almost with both sides, with all the materials. But I would really just think that it would just really kind of complete it with, I don't think you need the stucco to accentuate those smaller gables. If you go to the other elevations, David, there, the only element, and I'd be curious as you go forward with the preliminary development, how you deal with the small portion of the gable that extends above the small gables on the large roof. That is a little bit tricky as far as those intersections are concerned. And I would just be very curious with respects to that. Just two more comments that I would hope might be in the motion. It's suggesting no corner boards on the walls, but in fact, the beveled intersection of the siding coming, I really like that. I like the cleanliness of that. And the other issue too is really study, this is a great application to recess this fenestration as deeply as possible. If you don't place doors on the Maybank Highway side, be honest about the glazing and let it be full glazing as well. But overall, I think that again, a little bit more editing, simplifying. Hope I'm not suggesting to take a piece down that you really like, but I don't think the cupola really helps you in this regard. My comments.
This is Jeff. I just, it seems like this building, the way it's expressed, is just asking too much of the site. I know we've kind of talked about it, Aaron and Andy, and I echo that sentiment. And I think with that, there was going to be some more articulation in the building and maybe some differences in the dimensions that might present some opportunity to get some better relief with the massing. I'm a little concerned about that Maybank, the long view down Maybank, and looking at these short, the parapeted ends of the building, the bookends. I think I like the gables, but I think that if David, if we can go back one page, there's something about the rural simplicity of buildings that we talked about on the previous application that is almost here. And I feel like the parapeted ends detract from the simplicity. It does feel like a collection of buildings. I think Lossie's right on with that. But it's how the interaction between those buildings come, but it's a little muddied to me. But where the parapet ends into the gable next to it seems a little confusing. If this were built over time, I don't think it would be built like that. It just seems to kind of defy practical, I don't know what you call it, practical evolution of a building. And further, I think when you look at it from Maybank, it kind of dilutes, I think, the idea of it being multiple buildings. It to me looks like a clash of multiple buildings. I don't know if there's a clarity of massing that I like to see in more rural, and I know this is not exactly rural, it's transitional, but if it's going to be inspired by those rural Johns Island structures, then I think there ought to be a little bit more simplicity in massing. And I think right now the massing in my mind is too jumbled up. And I think that's in part because we're taking every buildable inch of the site and extruding it up. And the buildings need some breathing room, like Andy was saying, to help those forms get a little relief from each other. I think the site plan comment about it needing to breathe is spot on. And when you extract the building up in 3 dimensions, the same comment applies. The building needs some breathing room between the parapeted mass and the gabled mass, in my opinion. And I totally agree with Dinos about the cupola. Maybe it's not needed. It further adds to the confusion. When I hear about the material palette for this small of a building, the siding, the stucco, the steel, the wood, it's a lot for a little building. Sometimes as designers, we just want to throw everything we got to a project, but man, there's beauty in simplicity, and I would urge a more simplified palette. But before we even get to the architecture, I can't get past the site. The site plan just needs some breathing room to not have enough room for a tree to be planted along Maybank, which if I were to close my eyes and go further into the country, as the Town and Country calls it, that's all I think about is the trees on Maybank. To strip them all away and come up with a building is a little bit hard for me to swallow.
I agree with you, Jeff. To me, it feels like there was that 25-foot buffer, and in some cases, I think it was even 50 feet. And I don't know how many new developments are this close to the street of Maybank Highway.
I don't mind, like I think Aaron said, that the building's encroaching into the buffer. Encroachment is one thing, eliminating is another. And we certainly have the right to grant that, but I think Aaron said it beautifully. We have a responsibility to build on the character that was Johns Island, and I'm not saying the potential is not there. It's just not here right now.
I don't think I'm to the point that where the building and where the site plan is. Once again, I'll support some encroachment. I'll support probably a lot of encroachment in this situation, but I need to see something that gives back to the deal, gives back to the public space, not just let's push it all the way up and get all we can out of it without working with the frontage. And I just don't think we're there, and just hearing the comments from everybody, I don't think the building's there. You know, I don't want to step on anybody with any other comments, but you know, I don't know that I'm ready to support this moving forward.
Would anyone care to the discussions? Would anybody care to make a motion at this time, or we still need to deliberate and chat?
I mean, I'm willing to make a motion, but I want to give everybody their say before I do so.
I don't disagree with any comments that the board members have made. I mean, in other words, we're shoehorning everything we can into everything we can into simple site. And I agree. I can get behind some encroachment. And as we get closer to the River Road node, yes, you know, there can be exceptions made, but I mean, to build right to a wetlands buffer, taking the, you know, parking lot right to that buffer, it's a lot. It's a lot for this site, I feel like.
given, I think that we're fairly unanimous on our thoughts, and I welcome especially Dinos's help in crafting this motion. But I would make a motion for deferral with staff comment number 3, I believe, regarding the wall, the screening wall. And then board comments to study the amount of encroachment into the buffer and to loosen the site plan up to give articulation along the frontage and to the way the building addresses the public realm. To study the materiality of the building.
Andy, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. I only got study the amount. Sorry, can you repeat the second?
Okay, I'm sorry. To study the encroachment into the buffer and the interaction of the building with the public realm, and to loosen the site plan up to provide articulation in the site and room for the site to breathe. To study the materiality of the building, to simplify, I believe Dinos was saying to remove the stucco and to kind of stick with a simplified version of the materiality. To study removing the cupola, the monitor on the building. I believe Jeff's comment was to study the massing of the building and how it can be given some ability to loosen up and to breathe. I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember everybody's comments.
You've done great. The only thing I would put in there is just to be mindful of deeply recessing the fenestration.
Yes. I believe you wanted it without the corner boards.
Yeah.
Okay.
Andy, I'm just gonna ask if you could mute yourself.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, we have a motion for deferral with the following comments. Staff comment number 3, board comments number 1, study the encroachment amount. Number 2, loosen the site plan for more articulation of site elements. Number 3, address the public realm, give back to the public. Number 4, simplify the material palette. Number 5, study the removal of the cupola. Number 6, study the massing to provide relief between masses. Number 7, recess the fenestration. And lastly, number 8, present an option for materials for deleting the corner boards. And I think that kind of ties in with simplifying the material palette.
Mm-hmm.
But present option for deleting corner boards. We have a motion for deferral. Is there a second?
I'll be happy to second. Dinos?
Yes, thank you. I'll take roll for everybody else. Mrs. Smith?
Yay, in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Kraus?
Yay, in favor.
And Ms. Stevens?
Yay, in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. That's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Thank you,
guys. Have a
Lossie.
good evening.
Thank you, Lossie.
Thanks, Flossie.
All right. Item number 4 and 5 are minutes from our previous meetings.
And I would move forward for approval of minutes of 9/8/20.
Excellent.
And
Oh, go ahead.
only one revision to the minutes of 9/21/20. Within the motion to remove the reference to the poor structural aspects of the building.
Is that the report that you're wanting to remove reference to?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I will need to, item number 4 is approval of minutes from the 9/8/20 meeting. We have a motion for approval. Is there a second for that motion?
Sandy, I second.
Second, great, thank you. Take roll. Ms. Smith,
Yay in favor.
Kristen,
Yay in favor.
Miss Aaron,
Yay in favor.
and myself in favor too. And then finally, agenda item number 5, we have a motion for approval of minutes for the 9/21/20 meeting with the exception of removing reference to a structural report. Is there a second for that?
I'll second. This is Erin.
Thank you, Aaron. I'll take roll for the rest of us. Ms. Michelle?
Yay in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Kristen?
Yay in favor.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, in favor.
Myself in favor as well. Excellent.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See y'all later.
Travel safely, Andy.
Thanks.
Thanks to you
There you go.
guys.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody.